Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. Every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're on freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, and, let's see, pull up my notes here. Okay, every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, freedomslips.com. Let's see. Tonight we're going to have Diane Dimond, who is one of these guests who I've always wanted to get, okay? When I decided to do a radio show, this is one of those people that I wanted to bring forth to the people because she's an expert on the whole Michael Jackson situation. She actually was part of the raid on Neverland Ranch. So I'll be introducing Diane Dimond from Court TV fame, and she's the author of all these books, Be Careful Who You Love, Inside the Michael Jackson Case. She's also the author of Cirque du Soleil, which is about the Mikhail and Tariq Salahi, and the story about how they're the White House party crashers. And they were on the Real Housewives of Washington, D.C. and stuff like that. She also has, she writes a weekly crime and justice syndicated column that's distributed by Creators Syndicate, and it's posted every Monday morning on DianeDimond.net. So we'll be having her in a couple of seconds. Now, coming up next week, we got Mark Rudd, who was the former Weather Underground member. Fascinating guy. He was part of the Weather Underground. He met Castro. He met Che Guevara. Coming up to the week after that, we have Cindy Sheehan. You might remember her. She was the one who gave George Bush all that grief down there in Crawford, Texas. Okay, keep an eye out for me. Monday morning, I'm going to be on John B. Wells' Caravans at Midnight. We're recording Monday morning, but we're going to be on his show that evening. I think he's going to be playing it. Everyone heard me on Coast to Coast, and I got a lot of really good response for that. So I'm going to be coming up on John B. Wells' Caravans at Midnight. Diane, are you there?
I am here. How are you, Ed?
Pretty good. I'm a little frazzled. I don't know. A little
nervous. I don't know what's happening there in your studio.
I'm a little starstruck, to tell you the truth, man. Okay. I'm such a big fan. So, Diane, tell everybody about yourself and what you're up to and what you got coming up.
Well, tell them about myself. Look, first of all, I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I live in upstate New York, north of Manhattan. I am a crime and justice aficionado, and I write about crime and justice issues. I do assignments for Newsweek and the Daily Beast. Actually, Newsweek and the Daily Beast have sort of split, so now it's just the Daily Beast. I write books. I have written a book, as you indicated, about Mikhail and Tariq Salahi, the so-called White House gate crashers. And in 2005, I wrote a book about my decades-long investigation into the Michael Jackson case. But I continue to write a lot of articles, and I have another book project coming up this year, I hope. My fingers are crossed. I wish I could tell you about it, but I can't. And every week I write a new crime and justice column for Creators Syndicate. It's in newspapers across the country, but then on Monday morning I get to put it on my own website. And I try to, Ed, I try to take a look at the whole world of crime and justice and make it relatable to the people who are sitting at home listening to a program like this, or worrying about, I'm going to let my kid drive next year. Are they going to get involved in a carjacking, or are they going to get involved in drugs? What's the lingo I need to use? What's going to happen if they ever get involved in the crime and justice system? I try to interest people in the system in this country, because I really think it comes as a huge surprise when all of a sudden a family member gets arrested and nobody knows what to do. Do you need a lawyer? Do you not need a lawyer? Should you, keep your mouth shut? Should you talk? So I cover a wide range of issues in my weekly column, and I love to get feedback. So if anybody wants to send me a message, you can send it through DianeDimond.com. There's a little click on my website.
Hey, what about that thing you're working on now, Talk Center America?
Oh, Talk Center America, really fascinating for in Albuquerque, New Mexico, for goodness sake, on the radio. I went to Washington, D.C. and worked for National Public Radio, worked on All Things Considered, their show at night. Oh, cool. And then I went into television. Yeah, I did the newscast on All Things Considered, I don't know, 100 years ago. But then I went into television, and I've worked all over the place. If people who are listening know my name, you've seen me somewhere, on hard copy or extra or NBC or MSNBC or CNBC. I used to do a show with Geraldo. I filled in, anchored at Fox after the 9/11 attacks. They sent all their anchors over to Afghanistan, and they needed somebody to sit in the studios, so I did it for a few months. So I have always enjoyed being a freelance person, so I could keep my autonomy and do what I really wanted to do. But Talk Center America is a new invention by a dear friend of mine who happens to be a neighbor. He has invented a way for people. This is like call-in radio. I'm talking to you, call-in radio.
Yeah.
But this is call-in television. And it is an entirely different animal where last night, for example, we had a show all about crime and justice. And people could call in and ask me questions, or I had some experts on. They could ask the experts questions, but they were on television with me by coming in, calling in via Skype. It's a new invention. We're still beta testing it right now. But if you want to know more information for people listening, it's www.talkcenteramerica.com. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, there's a link up on my blog, the Opperman Report, and you can click on there. And there's even a couple little test videos you can watch on there. There's clips and stuff from Diane's shows.
Ed, what I like to say that we're beta testing this idea of a way to bring America together. You look at so much television, hear so much radio, and everybody's screaming at each other and yelling and hollering over, and you can't even understand what they're saying. Talk Center America is a place for people to come together to talk about what's going on in the world. It's sort of like America's water cooler. After the Boston bombing, for example, we had a lot of people call in and just lament the state of safety in America. Can you go outside and can you really feel safe? And so I look at it as a place where we can all get face to face. You just call in via Skype. You look at me, I look at you, everybody calling in looks at you, they look at me, and we have like a real conversation about what's going on in America. I think it's a whole new genre in TV.
Yeah, and people that are true crime fans, they're really dedicated people. They follow these trials. In some cases, they know the trials better than the lawyers involved. Like on the old
and a lot of times they ask better questions, Ed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I remember the old Court TV chat room, years ago. Like everyone knows every little detail of the case, and even in that Danielle Van Dam case, the prosecutors took notes from the chat room about the length of Danielle Van Dam's hair, and they used that in their the prosecution. But I want to ask you something.
Sure.
Now, because you've been around, I keep saying you've been around a long time. You've been around a long time. Listen, I've been a fan for a long time.
I've been around a long time, Ed. It's okay.
I know. It feels bad to say that. But now, you were a big Court TV host and commentator and correspondent. But what do you think nowadays, because I'm a little disturbed, I'll tell you the truth, about what I see on HLN, where it seems to be like the lynching channel. And it's so pro-prosecution. Have you noticed that?
Well, let me say this about that. Do you hear the carefulness in my voice?
Yeah.
I used to fill in for Nancy Grace. When she and I were buddies from Court TV, and when she went to HLN and needed a day off or wanted to go Dancing with the Stars, or I used to fill in for Nancy. And then I realized that there is a television executive desire for anchors like me or Nancy or Jane Velez Mitchell or whoever it happens to be these larger-than-life characters. Your nostrils have to flare, and you have to scream and yell, and you have to take a position, and you have to be kind of obnoxious, and that's just not me. And so I don't fill in for Nancy Grace anymore because I don't want to be that type of television host. I would rather not be a television host than be that type of television host, if you get my drift.
I
And
hear
so
you.
I just want to, you're a private investigator. You're a guy who deals in facts. I'm an investigative reporter. I deal in facts. I will give my opinion in my weekly column about things, but I don't want to cram my opinion down people's throats. I want to say fact, 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 fact. Now you decide. And frankly, in television, cable television land these days, the executives just don't think that that's an important enough thing to showcase. So I'm okay with that. That's fine. I'll go away and do other things, but I don't watch HLN very much anymore. And I lament that fact because
Yeah.
Nancy is my friend, and Jane Velez Mitchell and I, gosh, we used to work at WCBS together here in New York way back in the 80s. Can you believe that? So, they're my friends, but I just am not really interested in that act.
Yeah, because when you look at when Court TV first came on the air, like especially around during the O.J. Simpson trial,
Oh, yeah. I worked at Hard Copy at the time.
it was so different. And now during the Jodi Arias trial, they had this our bold question. They had a jury on every night saying that Jodi Arias was guilty of one thing or another, of being a Satanist, of being evil, of being crazy, of being horrible. Night after night after night. Isn't that jury tampering? How can we expect someone to get a fair trial when the media is broadcasting with the power? And you know the power that HLN has and Court TV has. When they show up in town around a courthouse, they take over all the parking, they take over all the hotel rooms, all the restaurant reservations, they take over.
Yeah,
Okay.
Been there, done that. Yeah, no, I know. I don't think it's jury tampering, Ed, because the jury is either sequestered in some of these cases, or they're told you may not watch the media. Please don't go on the internet. Don't turn on your TV. Now, do some of the jurors do that at home? Sure they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had them admit that to me in the past. But I think it's not so much jury tampering as it is unethical journalism.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep talking about Nancy Grace because she's a pal of mine, but I don't think Nancy would come out and say, I am a journalist. That's not what she is. She's a former prosecutor, and so she's going to give you the prosecutor's viewpoint of any case that she looks at. But do I think it does a disservice? Yeah, I think it does. I think it clouds people's vision and their interest in how does this thing called justice work. And they really should be more instructed to look at, hey, look what the prosecutor is doing. Look at what the defense person is doing. Now, did you see that ruling by the judge? The judge ruled that way because, and they need a more tutorial way of explaining what's happening rather than a biased, this person is guilty kind of view.
Or the way they presented Jodi Arias, who obviously is guilty, but they
she admitted she killed a guy,
Yeah, right. But they presented her. I've seen like those memes on Facebook where they have her next to like Pol Pot and Charles Manson and Adolf Hitler. you know?
She killed one guy. Come on, she killed one guy. Hitler killed a lot more than that.
Yeah, and I don't even think that guy, Travis, I don't even think he was that great a guy, okay? No one deserves to be killed, but the guy was a multi-level marketing guy, like a huckster, it doesn't deserve to be killed for sure. I'm not saying that. But let's not elevate this guy to sainthood and condemn her to the evilest person on the face of the earth. It was really disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah. So much television today is who's the bad guy and how bad can we make them? And let's, they're down, so let's kick them. It's not really very instructive about the way the justice system works. And when I worked at Court TV, for example, we were sort of all about saying things like, now watch what the defense attorney does here. And then afterward explaining it, why he did what he did or why she did what she, the questioning that she asked. And really informing people about the way the court system works. And that's gone completely out the window, which is,
Get it.
you were talking about my Talk Center America show that we did last night on crime and justice. I think with the demise of Court TV and with HLN really sort of abrogating its not responsibility, but its past habit of covering live trials, there's a real place for crime buffs to go, and it doesn't exist right now. So I'm trying to create a place for them to go, is what I'm trying to do with Talk Center America.
Well, it's definitely going to take off because my show is devoted a lot to true crime. And everyone keeps talking about how unique it is and it's a fresh air and all this kind of stuff. But one thing about HLN, again, I don't want to harp on them, but...
Well, they're the only game in town right now, really.
During Casey Anthony, they would... And everyone was so surprised that they got a not guilty verdict. I was predicting a not guilty verdict all along in that trial. But they would play over and over and over the prosecution side. When they do their little repeat parts, they're only playing the prosecution. So people are only seeing the prosecution side of the trial, and everyone just dismisses the defense case.
Well, if you're interested in something, you start watching at the very beginning, and that's when the prosecution puts on its case. The prosecution gets to go first. And so that's why everybody concentrates on them in the beginning. I was in that courtroom. I was covering that for Newsweek and the Daily Beast at the time and tweeting live out from the balcony of the courthouse. And, it was a fascinating trial. I went to jury selection, and it was a fascinating trial. And I agree with you, Ed. She was overcharged.
Oh, yeah.
You don't go for the death penalty when you can't even say how this poor pile of bones in the wood died. Nobody knew how Kaylee died or who put her there.
There was a death, no manner of death.
Yeah, there was no cause of death. There was nothing. So why and I put the onus, frankly, on the state attorney general in Florida. Why in the world would you decide to go for the death penalty? Go for first-degree murder, or go for child endangerment, or go for something that you could get her on. Because what happened in the end? She went free.
Well, in a case like that, don't you think it's because she gets the nickname Tot Mom, and it's repeated 1,000 times every night on TV, and that influences the district attorney on how to charge?
I don't know that the Tot Mom, I don't know that moniker did anything, but I think that the massive amount of media attention from Tot Mom, Nancy Grace came up with that, to then she took it to ABC, Good Morning America every day, and then it went nationwide, and it became a cause celeb in America. I think it was the media attention that made somebody in the state of Florida get their back up and say, we're going to prosecute her to the max. Yeah, well, great. How did that work out for you? Not very well. You should defer, in my opinion. Those prosecutors were pretty damn good. I was sitting in that courtroom. I was watching them. But it was the charge that they charged her with that gave the jury the wiggle room to say, we just don't know. We're just not sure. So I would think the powers that be in these states, i.e. the attorney generals, should leave it to the local district attorneys. What do you think you got? What do you think you can convict on? Go with that.
So we got about 8 minutes till the break. Time's going so fast already. What are your...
Oh, you've got lots more time.
I know. I got you for 2 hours. See, the audience should know how I got to beg these guests to come on for 2 hours with me, man. If they only knew, But now, what were your, I don't want to say your favorite cases, but give me an overview of your favorite cases, I guess you want to say.
Well, I like to take a case and explore the edges of it. I do like to be in the courtroom. I love courtrooms. They're like, these cauldrons of human soup where, the rich, the poor, the old, the young, the black, the white, the Asian, the Hispanic, everybody gets poured into one soup and you all get treated the same way. Unless you happen to be really rich and then you get a famous lawyer. But I like to be in courtrooms, but I like to work a case from the outside. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I loved the O.J. Simpson case.
Okay.
Because I wasn't in the courtroom, but I was outside trying to find witnesses that should have been in the courtroom. And toward that end, I found two really important witnesses that I brought to air. One was O.J. Simpson's drug dealer. And this was not something that really came up in the trial, but O.J. Simpson had a horrible drug habit.
Cocaine.
And I brought his drug dealer on. The second thing I did was I found a source that got me a copy of the so-called interrogation tape of O.J. Simpson with the cops Lang and Van Adder.
Yeah.
It was about 30 minutes long, and we put it on the air on hard copy. And it was the soppiest, easiest, most laissez-faire interrogation I've ever heard in my whole life. And we put it on the air, and we exposed the police investigation into OJ for what it was. They were pretty starstruck. You know, at the end of it, they were asking him for his autograph, for God's sake. So I like to go outside the main case and see what's going on the periphery that is not being put into court. I did that with the Michael Jackson case. I've done that with, so many other cases like you have never even heard of. There was a girl in Kansas City, the daughter of a judge, who killed her boyfriend. And nobody thought to go look and see if this boyfriend ever had any other girlfriends. Well, I found other girlfriends and figured out that this was just a kind of a Lothario kind of guy that sort of asked for it. I hate to say that a victim asked for it, but he played one side up the other, and he wound up dead. So that's the kind of case that I like the best.
Any man that cheats on his girlfriend is playing with death. You're taking your life in your hands. You got to realize that. Now, that's very interesting. Now O.J. was addicted to cocaine?
He was into cocaine, but he also, according to this drug dealer, had a big, a circular vase, a big, tall, 8-inch tall vase in his dressing room full of pills.
Really?
Oh, uppers, downers, sideways, up, all sorts of things. And every morning he would grab a handful of these pills and just take a big swallow. And in the middle of the day, he'd go in and take a handful of these pills and take a big swallow. And then in the afternoon, he'd be in his Rolls Royce at the local deli down the street trying to get a score of some cocaine or something. So he sort of spent his days being high. So what do you think about, his capability of knowing what the hell he did over at Nicole's house that night? I just didn't think it was, I thought it was important to report, and I did.
What about the stories? I've heard some stories about Ron Goldman being involved in selling drugs, and that Nicole and Faye Resnick were also helping him out.
I never heard that about Ron Goldman, honestly. I did hear it about Nicole being into drugs and her best friend, Faye Resnick. Yeah, I heard about both of them. But Ron Goldman, I swear, I still talk to his sister, Kim Goldman. I just think that poor schlump was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the best piece of evidence against O.J. Simpson was the fact that on the toe of Ron Goldman's boot, as he laid there dead in Nicole's courtyard there, was one drop of blood on the top of his boot. And that blood was O.J.'s. So how the hell did that get there if O.J. wasn't at the crime scene?
I was going to ask you something else. Let me think.
I know there's just so much to talk about.
That's a big case. I had a guest on. We talked for 5 hours about the O.J. Simpson case.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of it, but I do know that he's in prison now. He weighs 50 pounds too much because he doesn't exercise, and he sits and eats a bunch of starchy, crazy foods. And my phone is ringing. I hope my husband gets it. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about that.
He's probably where he should be.
Okay, we got the break coming up now.
Okay,
it's a short break. We have with us tonight Diane Dimond, who's the author of "Be Careful Who You Love: Inside the Michael Jackson Case," and Cirque du Soleil, "Be Careful Who You Trust," a book about the White House party crashers. Famous correspondent Diane Dimond. She's been on Court TV and Inside Edition and Hard Copy and all this kind of stuff. HLN, filled in for Nancy Grace. she has a new thing now called Talk Center America, where you can call in and participate in the show with her and discuss things, true crime stories. Syndicated columnist. It's posted every Monday morning on DianeDimond.net. We'll be right back after this break. Get into the whole Michael Jackson stuff.
Thank you for listening to.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator, digital forensic investigator. We're here every Friday night on freedomslips.com. I want to remind everybody that we are a listener-sponsored station. We have no corporate sponsors. So if you like what you're hearing and you want us to keep being able to get guests like Diane Dimond from Court TV and HLN and DianeDimond.net, what you need to do is you need to visit freedomslips.com and click on the donate button to keep the station on the air. Also, too, we had a problem with our YouTube channel. And so we have a new YouTube channel, and it's called Talk Revolution Radio. Yeah, Talk Revolution Radio. So if you go on YouTube and you search for... Yeah, if you go on Revolution Radio, you go on YouTube, you search for Talk Revolution Radio, you'll get the station's YouTube channel. You got to subscribe to that because we lost all the subscribers. But also, too, you can find this show on my YouTube channel, which is the Opperman Report on YouTube. And subscribe to that, too, because we've got a lot of good shows coming on. So, Diane Dimond, we're back.
Ed, I have to ask you, where are you from? Because when you say my name, Diane Dimond, you sound like maybe you're from, like, Brooklyn.
No, I'm originally from London, England, Diane.
Well, you certainly don't sound like that, Ed.
No, I lost my accent when I left jolly old England.
You never spent any time here in New York?
No, I'm originally from the Bronx. Soundview Avenue in the Bronx between Parkchester and St. Lawrence Avenue, the number 6 train, right off the number 6 train.
I live on the other side. I live in Rockland County. I look over at the Bronx.
Oh, there you go. Well, then I moved to Staten Island, and I think that's where I picked up my...
That's what I'm hearing, Staten Island.
Staten Island, yeah, that's where I picked it up. But I left and I lost my accent because I've been gone from there for so long.
Yeah, not so much, Ed. I can still hear it.
I think when I'm on the air, it comes out more because I think in person I don't use it as much. Okay, now you got to be the number one expert on the Michael Jackson situation. And today, looking back, the whole thing has been sanitized and whitewashed, like he's some kind of like these charges were just so frivolous. And he's been cleared of all these charges. Good old Michael Jackson. What a saint he is now. Saint Michael. Okay? But let's face it. The man was on anesthesia to go to bed every night. Okay, that's how he died. And the whole Michael Jackson family and the people surrounding them are just so fascinating. Diane, how did you first get started in that case and catch your interest?
You know, I have always been a reporter from my youngest days in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I worked in a radio station, and I always covered crime and justice and courts and local government, and, you know, it's all one big soup. And how I got interested in the Michael Jackson case was not any interest by me. I never covered a celebrity case in my life. I was new to hard copy. I had worked at hard copy in the New York office, and I had just been transferred to LA. And I don't know, I'd probably been there about 3 or 4 months. And the boss came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Okay, you're supposed to be the crime reporter. Come with me." Okay. So I went into her office, and she said, "We have a tip from the local TV station, NBC station in Hollywood, that there are cops at Michael Jackson's door at Neverland Ranch and at his condo in Beverly Hills. Find out why." Okay, find out why. I'm in a brand new city. I don't have a police source to my name, but I started working it. And lo and behold, because of a great producer named Steve Duran, who still is around there in Hollywood, we got a cold call in because the local station started reporting the cops are at Michael Jackson's house and taking boxes of evidence out, and we don't know why they're there or what they're looking for. And I got a cold call that my producer, Steve Duran, took, who said, I saw Diane's piece about the Hollywood Madam Heidi Fleiss, and she tells it like it is. So I want her to know what it's like about Michael Jackson. I got some documents for you.
Oh, really?
Meet me at a restaurant in Malibu. Was it Malibu? Yeah, I think, or Venice Beach at 8 o'clock tonight. So we went, and there was a source, and I got handed a bunch of documents, and they were handed to me with the express statement that you cannot let this get covered up again this time. Now, you're a private detective, Ed.
Yeah.
I'm an investigative reporter. When somebody says, here are some documents that are going to prove why they're looking at Michael Jackson, and don't let it get covered up against this time, you think to yourself, whoa, this has happened before. So we sat at a table and ordered some appetizers, and Steve started talking to this person, and I started copying down notes from these documents. I couldn't take the documents because they were absconded with from city files.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they were child welfare. They were youth and family services files and police department files. And it was the whole story of how this kid was claiming Michael Jackson had dated him and wooed him and taken him around the world and seduced him and sexually abused him. And his mother knew and his father knew. And it was the whole story.
Did you mention that kid's name? Because his name is out in the public.
Yeah, I now can tell you, I won't give you even a sex of the source that gave me these documents. But
I mean the boy that was
his name was Jordy Chandler.
Jordy Chandler, okay.
And Jordy Chandler, as I write in my book about Michael Jackson, which I wrote many years later after I finally figured out this puzzle, Jordy Chandler was ultimately given by Michael Jackson $15.3 million to be quiet. That's why there was no case. There was no court trial for Jordy Chandler because Jordy Chandler's parents decided it would be better for this 12, 13-year-old kid to take a bunch of money and shut his mouth. And so Jordy Chandler got an annuity of $15.3 million. The parents each got $1.5 million. This is all spelled out in my book, and I show you the document that provides for it. His attorney, Larry Feldman, was paid about $5 million. So you're adding all this up, 15.3, $1.5 million, $1.5 million, that's 18, plus another 5 for the attorney, plus then Michael Jackson paid his huge defense bill and his private detective's bill.
Anthony Pellicano.
Yeah, who made my life a living hell.
I believe that.
Johnny Cochran, and when I totaled it all up, it was about $25 or $30 million Michael Jackson spent to keep the first allegations quiet. So that's how I got involved. Somebody came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Figure it out," and I figured it out.
Okay, I got to tell you a story real quick because now you and I have not discussed this topic before.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, it's like I'm going to saw you in half, like a magic act. Okay, we've never discussed this before. But now you said this source said to you he doesn't want it to be covered up again. Okay,
right.
Let me tell you a story. Back around 1990, I was working in New York. I had a beeper and cellular phone company in New York City in the Staten Island Mall. I had an employee that worked for me, and his dad worked for Michael Jackson on one of their tours. It was the tour that was promoted by Al Sharpton and Michael Frances, the mafia guy who testified against his own father.
Yeah.
Okay, and we were talking about this, and this is way before Jordy Chandler ever hit the news. Okay, no, there was no accusations in public at all about Michael Jackson being a child molester. And this father who worked for the tour, that he was a driver for the tour, said to me, he says, "Oh, no, that guy Michael Jackson, he's no good, man. They caught him with little boys." I said, "What?"
What year was this? What year was this, Ed?
It was around 1990. It had to be like 1990 or 1991. It was Chandler came out in 93, correct?
Yeah, August 23rd, 1993.
It was way before that. No one was talking about this. But he said during that tour, he worked for the Michael Jackson tour, and they caught Michael Jackson red-handed with a little boy, and it was covered up, and they all covered it up. Everybody in charge of that tour covered it up.
You know what?
Yeah.
Shame on them. Shame on them.
I went
Because
I went to them and I said, listen, let's go to the media, let's do this. And they said, Ed, no way. These people are so dangerous, and you know firsthand how dangerous they are, Diane. Okay, Pelicano was a serious guy. When they arrested him, he had C4 explosives and hand grenades in his safe in his office there. Plus, he was wiretapping everybody in town. Okay,
including me. Yeah.
I believe it. I believe it. So you know these.
Well, I don't think back in 1990 Jackson even knew about Pelicano. But I'll tell you, if you grab my book, Ed, or if I can find one around my house, I'll send you one. But I started to really dig deep on this and drill in, and I found that even when Michael Jackson was living with his family at Havenhurst in Encino, California, this estate called Havenhurst, the gardener next door, his little boy suddenly had a problem, and then that gardener was given a big fat check and moved back to Mexico and had such a common Hispanic name that there was no way I could have traced him. But this was one of the checks that LaToya came out later and said, oh yeah, I saw checks with, lots of zeros at the end given to people just for the express reason for them to be quiet about my brother's habits.
Yeah, that's when she was with Jack Gordon, right?
1990, Now,
what do you think of what was the story with her relationship with Jack Gordon?
Well, they were married. The quick story is her father said, all right, you keep bugging me, LaToya, you want a career, I'll hire somebody to manage your career because, frankly, I don't think you're ever going to go anywhere. And he hired Jack Gordon.
Oh, my God.
Jack Gordon and LaToya wound up getting married. And I've had conversations with Jack Gordon before he passed away, and he sent me a manuscript that he was working on at one point about being in the Jackson family and being Jewish and them being so anti-Semitic and how difficult it was. But I think he really loved LaToya. I don't know about her, but I think he genuinely did love LaToya, and they were married. That was her first husband.
But the guy, the whole story about him with the massage parlors and all his partners turning up dead, and then didn't he go to prison for bombing Harry Reid?
Well, his whole side of that is that Harry Reid is completely crooked, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is the Senate Majority Leader in the United States Congress. So that's a whole nother story, Ed. Now, so you're tapping deep into my psyche and off of Jackson, but yeah.
Okay. I got kicked off the internet.
Hi there.
Yeah, Diane, you're back, right?
Yeah, I'm back here. Sorry about that.
No, that was me. That was my internet. I think I'm live, okay? If Ann could give me a note here saying we're back on live. But why don't you keep going about the strange characters around the Jackson family?
Well, over the years, since 1993, I have come across so many bizarre Jackson hangers-on, and it includes members of the Jackson family. They're just kind of, they invite controversy. They invite publicity, even if it's bad. They figure if their name is in the news, that's a good thing, even if it's for a bad reason. Michael Jackson was accused of child molestation in 1993. My first reports about that. He went to Mexico because he was on a world tour I think it was a Dangerous tour. His family back in Los Angeles decided to have a news conference to talk about a children's charity they wanted to raise money for. And oh, by the way, Michael Jackson was completely innocent. It was just weird and strange, and it just became, de rigueur for that family.
Okay, well, while we're getting into that, now, don't two of the brothers, there's a woman that has children with two of the Michael Jackson brothers?
Yeah. That would be Randy. Randy married a woman named Alejandra, and they had some kids, 2 kids, I think. And then Jermaine, who, the cock of the walk of the Jackson family, Jermaine, decides he likes Alejandra, and he has some children with her. 3 boys, I think, if I'm remembering right, and then they get married. So now there's this natural schism between Randy and Jermaine. And when Michael got in trouble, in now we flash forward to 2003. There's yet another young boy charged. I'm standing outside of Neverland. There's no other reporters around, but there are 70 cop cars coming into Neverland to raid the place. Who does Michael Jackson call on? He doesn't call on his big brother Jermaine to come and help him. He calls on Randy. And Jermaine, from all my sources, tell me, went kind of nuts. No, he wanted to be there to help Michael get through this crisis. But Randy was already there, and Randy stayed by Michael's side for almost the whole time. For the whole time.
Okay, are they enablers?
Yes, of course they are, and they have been from the very beginning. All of my sources within that Havenhurst house, within Neverland, in the music industry, and other service organizations that serviced Michael Jackson. I'm talking, limousines and wardrobe and, all these people. They all said that the entire family knew what Michael Jackson was, that he kept young boys, that they were aghast at it. They couldn't believe it, but they would never publicly say anything against Michael because why? Michael was the bank. Right. Michael had the wallet. None of them had any decent careers to support themselves, except Janet did. And LaToya, I must say, she always saved her money. Maybe when Jack Gordon died, he left her with some money, or I don't know. But the girls were okay. It was the brothers and the father that always had their hand out to Michael Jackson. And that's why once he moved to Neverland, he closed the gate at the front door 1 mile away from his front door and instructed the guards, never let my brothers or my father into this property.
And so he had a mile buffer from the gate to his home, but then inside the home, describe what he had in his bedroom, how many kind of buffers and warning things he had from his bedroom.
Well, the whole house was opulent. We've seen pictures of it now inside, before he bought it and after he bought it, fully furnished. And he added all these crazy marble statues and, gewgaws around, lots of books. But when you went in the front door, you took a right, and then you took a left down to the main long hallway to the master bedroom suite, which was 2 stories tall. And that long hall to the bedroom had an alarmed warning system. And you didn't know that you were tripping an alarm as you walked down that long hall, but inside the master bedroom chamber, that's where the alarm went off. And I was told by many people who worked at Neverland, security and domestic people, that was always armed, and Michael Jackson always knew when somebody was coming toward his bedroom door, and it was set because he often had a young boy in residence with him. He didn't want anybody walking in on them.
Oh boy. Can you describe the conditions in Geordie Chandler's home about the period of time that Michael Jackson lived in Geordie Chandler's home?
Mm-hmm. That's such a compelling time, Ed. You pick a good time. This is pre-media storm. So this is 1992, 1993, and young Geordie Chandler lives with his divorced mother, June, and his stepsister, and his stepfather. But he goes to see his father a lot. And his father, who's now deceased, had a room for Geordie. And he hears that Michael Jackson is now his son's best friend. And the father, according to a diary that the father kept that I got my hands on and I write about in my book, the father said, I felt so alienated from my son. So I asked Michael Jackson, come on over to my house. And Jackson did. And Jackson sort of moved in to Dr. Evan Chandler's home. He was a dentist. And he lived in a little room with Geordie Chandler. There were bunk beds, upper and lower. And Dr. Chandler wrote in this diary that I got my hands on, and I quote in the book, that he would peek in at night when they were asleep, and Michael was in the same bed, the lower bunk, as his young son, who's now, 10, 11 years old,
Right.
and they're spooning.
Oh, my God. Okay, we're going to have to take a break there, okay, because we've got a break coming up.
Okay, no.
This is that long break I was telling you about. We are on with Diane Dimond, okay, from Court TV fame, from Hard Copy, she has her own web broadcast she's working on now called Talk Center America. She's the author of Be Careful Who You Love, The Inside the Michael Jackson Case. I don't think there's a person on the face of this earth that has more information, more detailed investigative information about this Michael Jackson case, which is horrific and should be on the front page. Everyone, when you hear the name Michael Jackson, this is the story you should hear. We'll be right back after this.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the author of the book called How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, which you can find on Amazon.com. We're here tonight with Diane Dimond from Court TV fame and from Hard Copy and HLN and all that kind of stuff. And she wrote the book called Be Careful Who You Love, Inside the Michael Jackson Case. And as we left, she was describing how Michael Jackson would be living in his bedroom with this little 11-year-old boy, I believe, and they were in a bunk bed together spooning. Are you there, Diane?
Yeah, I am. You're talking about Jordy Chandler.
Yeah.
The year is 1992, 93, and his father is watching this relationship happen and getting more and more concerned. But when he talks with Michael Jackson, the next day or the next week, Jackson stays at his house, sort of moves in for more than a month. He's told that, I have pure thoughts about your son. I want to help you write screenplays. I want to help you, any way I can. I love your family. I want to be part of your family. So, in retrospect, Ed, the bottom line is Michael Jackson was found not guilty of being a pedophile in court. But I will tell you that long before I ever did the Michael Jackson story, I did several other stories about child molesters, and I've done many since then. And I know one thing. Child molesters, pedophiles, are the most charming, crafty, personable criminals you will ever encounter. And never forget one point. A pedophile has to seduce the parents before they can ever get to the child. And when I think of those moments back then when he was flying around the country and the world with Jordy Chandler and his mother, buying his mother jewelry and putting her in limousines and sending her on shopping sprees, thus leaving him alone with this little boy. And when he was, talking to Jordy Chandler's father and plying him with all this praise about his screenplays and whatnot, it sure sounds and felt like a seduction of the parents to get to the child.
The stories I heard were, though, that it was so blatantly obvious what was going on, that Michael and this little boy were locked at the mother's house, that they were locked in a bedroom, and she would bring the food to the door and leave the food in front of the door. They would open up the door and bring the food in.
Well, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. And I know Michael Jackson fans love to hate me and they'd like me dead and all of that. But let's turn the tables and say you are June Chandler and your little boy who has been left without his father because you've divorced and you've remarried somebody else who's not really that interested in your kid, suddenly finds a superstar best friend. And this superstar best friend takes him all over the world. He takes him on shopping sprees. He takes him up to his ranch called Neverland with, a theater and fully stocked candy and a zoo and a swimming pool and, 2,700 acres to play on and horses and all. Are you going to deny your kid that? Or are you going to say, thank God my young son has something positive in his life? And this is how the seduction starts. I also write in the book, Be Careful Who You Love, Inside the Michael Jackson Case, that busloads of young kids would come to Neverland. He had a manager named Norma Stakos. Norma would arrange for busloads of young kids to come to Neverland. Yay, boy, isn't Michael Jackson a fabulous, philanthropic young man that he allows all these kids to come to his ranch and have a great day. But according to my sources, Michael Jackson was standing in the front room of Neverland looking out at the kids, picking the ones he liked. And he would tell Norma Stakos to go and get their address and find out what their situation was. And he always picked kids from broken homes. There was just a mother around. There was only one parent to have to convince that this kid needed to come to Neverland and stay in Michael Jackson's bedroom. There very rarely were two parents. And so that's another hallmark of a very gifted, crafty career pedophile. Again, Michael Jackson was found not guilty of this by a court of law in Santa Barbara County, California in 2005. However, the behaviors were so similar. They're textbook. If you look at the FBI profile of what a pedophile does, bingo.
Just amazing. It's just amazing. No, there's a photograph that shows Michael Jackson, Liberace, and Scott Thornton in a convertible Mercedes-Benz or no, not a Rolls-Royce on Buckingham Palace property. Right? My God, just imagine being a fly on that wall. What was going on? Now here you got Liberace, who was dating an underage boy, Scott Thornton. Did you ever talk to Scott Thornton about his relationship with Michael Jackson?
Yeah, I never did, because by the time I came up for in prison, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that the young man who had the plastic surgery to look like Liberace and all of that, and then got caught up in check fraud charges?
I got caught up in what kind of charges?
Check fraud and
yeah. Well, if you don't know the story about Scott Thornton, he claims now that he was Michael Jackson's lover, but also and he's in jail right this minute. He's living at the Bunny Ranch. But
and the bottom line is no, I never did talk to him. But when people are dead, all sorts of people come forward and make claims. Am I saying that didn't happen? No, I'm not saying that didn't happen, because I don't think Michael Jackson had a proclivity for women at all. Not at all.
Well, there's no doubt that
not for the first wife either.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Thornton and Jackson were friends. Okay, maybe who knows what if they had sex or not, and who really cares if they were both adults? Okay, but right. The thing is, Scott Thornton. Did you know that he was a witness to the Wonderland murders?
Yes. Ooh, I remember this story now. Yeah, I didn't cover it. I don't pretend to know a lot about it, but I did read about that. Yeah.
Well, it's just fascinating, this cast of characters that are around Michael Jackson. You can't make it up.
No, you can't. And, there are, even when you go to the cast of characters of the people who were his domestic servants, the people who worked for him in public relations, a man named Bob Jones, who is now deceased, a man who was head of security, Bill Bray was his name. He has also passed away. And the people who he surrounded himself to make his music, there were many homosexuals, and who cares if they're homosexuals? You're consenting adults. I don't care about that stuff. What I care about is when children are hurt. And there are a lot of people out there, a lot of Michael Jackson fans will say, well, how was he hurt? He got to fly around on a jet. He went to Monaco. He went to Disneyland. He got free rides. If he was sexually abused, if any of these children were sexually abused, and I believe they were, They were hurt. They were hurt emotionally. They were hurt physically. And, it never ceases to amaze me that people out there continue to write me hateful, horrible things that say, but he was such a musical genius. He couldn't possibly have done this. Get your head out of the sand, folks, because pedophiles are everywhere. They are in your church, in your Girl Scout, in your Boy Scout troop. They're in your family. They're in, the bakery down the store, the store down the block. They are everywhere and anywhere. I'm not saying you know, you have to be careful of everyone in the whole wide world, but don't tell me because somebody has musical talent, they can't also be a pedophile, because they can.
Did you ever talk to Jordy Chandler?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how did that go?
It went very well, actually, and it was during a time when his mother and father were divorced, of course, and fighting like cats and dogs. And this young kid, I discovered, would go to the movies at a specific mall in the Century City area of Los Angeles every weekend. They'd just drop him off and leave him. In the middle of this huge storm of news and controversy, somebody would just drop him off at the mall and he would go there every Saturday. And I went there and spoke to him, yes.
Wait a second, hold on. You're telling me that while this was all in the news, that they were dropping him off at the movie theater when he was 11, 12 years old?
Yep. Yep. You want to go to the theater? Okay, go. Here's some $20. Go to the movies.
And so you went there and talked to him when he was that young?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, then what happened?
Well, I consider some of what he said unreportable because he was a kid. He was 13 years old at the time. He was caught up in this horrible drama. I'm a mother. I can relate. And, I put a little bit of it in the book, but I didn't dwell on it because I didn't, frankly, Ed, want people to think I was in cahoots with Jordy Chandler, which I was not. Certainly not with his father. Never met with his father. Met with his father's wife.
Oh, the father's wife. But what about the mother? You ever meet with her?
I never met with her, but I did see her at the trial in 2005. And at that point, she and Jordy Chandler, gosh, it had been 11 years. He refused to come and testify at that trial on behalf of the second public the second boy who went public, Gavin Arvizo. Yeah. But his mother came, and she revealed at that time that she hadn't talked to her son in 11 years.
Well, I can't blame him. I can't blame him. Have you ever visited the website? It's an old website. It's taken down now, called All That Glitters.
Oh, that sounds familiar, yeah.
It had the transcripts of the conversations with Pelicano negotiating with the mother and the father and stuff.
Oh, yes.
So you read all of that.
I did.
Have you ever talked to Pelicano?
Well, Anthony Pelicano, the private detective to the stars in Los Angeles, is in prison now, which let me just say, couldn't happen to a more deserving person. He used to call me on the phone and pretend to be somebody else. Okay. And being new to Los Angeles at the time, I didn't know who he was. But he kept warning me away from specific stories like the Heidi Fleiss story and, whatnot. And after I broke the Jackson story, I went to a news conference where Anthony Pelicano and the attorney Howard Weitzman appeared. And the minute Pelicano started to talk, I was sitting in the front row and I snapped my head around and I looked right at him, and he knew that I knew that he was the one who had been calling me, trying to ward me off these other hot stories. And he became a thorn in my side because I came to believe that my phone at hard copy was being tapped. My husband and I devised a little red herring sort of thing. And after I discovered my phone was being tapped, I went home and I told my husband, you know what? I think this is happening. He said, tomorrow I'm going to call you. We're going to have a conversation and let's see if it comes back. So at 9 o'clock in the morning, my husband called me on my phone at hard copy. Now, I think Anthony Pelicano is probably bugging this conversation. My husband says to me, so honey, hi, how's that documentary on Anthony Pelicano coming? That's going to be great when you release that to the public. And I said, oh, it's coming great. Man, that guy's going to be so mad once this hits the air. Okay, love you, bye-bye, and we hang up. I sat at my desk, and it took about 22 minutes.
Really?
Before one of the hard copy lawyers came over from another part of the Paramount Pictures lot and tapped me on the shoulder and said, Diane, tell me about this documentary you're working on about Anthony Pelicano. What, Ed, I wasn't working on a documentary about Anthony Pelicano at all. Hard copy didn't do documentaries, for God's sake.
Right.
But it told me somebody was listening to my conversations, and it was going right back to my legal department. And I asked this attorney, I remember her name, Cindy. I said, Cindy, where did you hear that? And she said, I heard it from Howard Weitzman's office. The attorney, I used to work for Howard Weitzman. I said, oh, really? Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not doing a documentary on Anthony Pellicano. So my long answer to your question, Ed, is I never talked directly to Anthony Pellicano except to ask some questions at
Right.
the press conference. But he was listening to me talk a lot.
When's he getting out, do you know?
I don't know. But I got wrapped up in some sort of civil case, like a mass tort against him and the phone company that allowed him to tap so many people. And I don't know, there may be some, maybe I'll get $5 at the end of it or something, but I think he's in for 10 more years or so.
Yeah, because he had a device that could record anybody's phone calls without actually visiting the location and attaching any equipment onto the trunks or to the landlines over there. He did it through the phone company.
Yeah, he was brilliant. And
Yeah.
at one time, he had a device that he would put on a pole, like a transformer pole, and it was like a big umbrella. Not even that big, but like an umbrella that would point toward your house. And I had another private detective friend out of L.A. who found one at the end of my street once, pointed at my house. Well, Brad Pitt also lived in my neighborhood, so I was never quite sure who was being tapped. But anyway, the umbrella got taken down. So, look, Anthony Pellicano was really, really, really good at what he did. But what he did was illegal.
Oh, yeah. And he would insert himself into cases. Like, he wouldn't wait to be hired.
No.
Yeah, he would do the surveillance first, get the information, and then contact the lawyers and walk in with all this information. Just fascinating.
He would go to Elizabeth Taylor and say, Liz, listen, the National Enquirer is going to do a story about you and such, and that you were drunk and so-and-so. Do you want to hire me? Just put me on for a week so, and I'll get that story quashed. When in fact there was no story in the works at all. But that's the way he played, and he made a lot of money, and he made a lot of enemies, but he had a lot of very powerful people that hired him over and over and over again because he delivered.
Oh yeah.
Those were the days of Hollywood.
Oh boy. Okay, now, all right. It's for you and me. It seems so black and white.
Could I say one more thing about Pellicano?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a colleague at the Daily Beast, Christine Pelzek, and she got an interview with Pellicano in lockup. I think he, at this point, was in a prison in Arizona. And she asked him about a lot of different cases and very briefly touched on Michael Jackson. And he said something to her, I wish I had the quote in front of me, but it was something like, I'm the father of 8 children. And once I started working for Michael Jackson, after the allegations of child molestation broke, after I started working for Michael Jackson, I realized the truth, and I couldn't work for him anymore. Now, Anthony Pellicano never explained himself, but he said something to the effect of what he did was worse than the allegations against him, and I can never work for a man like that, being the father of 8.
Oh, so you're saying that he knows something that's even worse than ever became public.
Or more definitive. Yeah, more definitive, I think, is what he meant. But, boy, I wish he would he put me on his visitors list. I'd be there in a second to try to figure out what it was. But
Yeah.
part of me, Ed, I'd like to get the whole Michael Jackson case behind me. 1993 to 2005 when I finally wrote the book. And still, here we are, 2014, you're still asking me questions about Michael Jackson.
Well, it's just so fascinating, and I looked around to look for interviews that you've done about this topic, and I don't see anything that's gone into this kind of depth. Now there was Latoya Jackson used to come out when she was on the outside of the family. She was with Jack Gordon. She was spilling her guts. She said that when Michael Jackson would come home, when he was doing The Wiz in New York City on Broadway, and he would come home from Studio 54, and they were living in an apartment together in Manhattan, that he would bring home soiled baby diapers.
Well, now that's one I haven't even heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of him going to maternity wards where brand new children were born and begging the nurses to let him stare into the eyes of the newborn children.
You're kidding.
No, mm-mm. I heard from detectives who went into Neverland that there was a cache of little boys' underwear kept as, souvenirs almost. This was before Michael Jackson had any children of his own. But I never heard the soiled diapers one. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, she had a lot to say. But now, all these people came forward. I don't know if you want to mention any names, but guys like Geraldo Rivera and Rita Crosby, so defensive of Michael Jackson, of his innocence. What was behind that?
Well, I know both of those folks. They're nice people. Rita, and I've worked with Rita at Fox for a little bit, and Geraldo and I used to do a show together on MSNBC. CNBC. Look, I'm trying to be generous here. They ply a very different journalistic trade than I do. They both have been to Neverland. They both have been wined and dined, so to speak, and given the grand tour, taken under their wing by the Jackson family. I tend to work differently. I stay away from both sides in any case I'm doing. Yes, I went and talked with Geordie Chandler, but I didn't spend any huge amount of time with him. I tried to get to Michael Jackson. He would not ever talk to me, ever. I tried to get with his executives. They wouldn't talk to me. So I go around the periphery of a subject so that I'm not tainted by the subject, and not all correspondents do that.
Well, Geraldo used to party with Michael Jackson at Studio 54 back in around those days. They were old friends.
And Geraldo has me on his radio show here in ABC in New York, and his Fox TV show, and he'll say, Diane, I just don't get it because I used to be at Neverland when he was fixing peas and carrots for the kids, and he seemed like a regular dad. And, I just want to look at him and say, Geraldo, you can be a regular dad and still be a child molester. You can be a regular dad and be a drug addict to the point where you don't know what you're doing when you're surrounded by little kids in a bed. The honest answer, Ed, is at the end of Michael Jackson's life, the last many years of his life, I'm saying, I don't know, the last 5 or 6 years of his life, he was so high and so stoned and so anorexic and so consumed in cosmetic surgeries and drinking Coke out of, rum and Coke out of Coke cans, that I don't think he had a real grasp on reality at all. Could he stand in the kitchen and make peas and carrots for his kids? Yeah. But did that mean he was lucid in all other aspects of his life? I'm not willing to grant that. And there are some reporters that do, and I'm just not one.
Yeah, he really did deteriorate there not even toward the end. It seemed like his drug problems went on for a long, long time. He wrote a song about Demerol.
Yeah, and I feel such pity for this man. Nobody ever asked me this question. I'm glad you bring it up, because it's like, you're the bitch who brought down Michael Jackson. Well, no, I'm the bitch who just revealed a bunch of facts. But I do, as a human being, feel great pity for this person. As I write in my book, I think he was a victim of child molestation.
Okay, let's get into that when we get back.
Okay.
Oh my God, we have Diane Dimond, who is a hero of mine. I got to tell you, this woman is a hero of mine. No, because Diane, listen, I know what you went up against. I know what some of these people are capable of doing. I know the cesspool that you were fighting up against there. But Diane Dimond, DianeDimond.net is her website. She's got all kind of stuff going on. Got a bunch of books. What about Michael Jackson? What about the Salahis? Circle Salahi. You can find both of those links.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're on freedomslips.com, on Studio A, every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can catch us live. If you want to support the station, because remember, we're a listener-sponsored station, so if you want to support us, you got to go to freedomslips.com and click on the donate button. By the way, there's a whole new promotion they have going on where if you want to get copies of all my shows on a CD, you send the station $30 and you tell them about it, and they'll make one big CD of all the shows we've ever had with all my crazy guests, the people we've had, like we've had Cheryl McCullum and Steph Watts and Vito Colucci and all the true crime people. We just had last week, we had a really good show with Jim Fetzer and Oli Demigard where they're interviewing this woman who has first-hand knowledge of some JFK shooters and stuff like that. And, of course, Mayor Jim Rothstein, the ex-NYPD detective who was the investigator on the Son of Sam case. So you got all that stuff. We got Mark Rudd coming up, Weather Underground. Cynthia McKinney, who's a former congresswoman. She's be coming on in a couple of weeks. And Cindy Sheehan, who was the anti-war protester who moved in next door to George Bush to give him hell. Not enough hell as far as I'm concerned, but quite a bit of hell. So Diane Dimond, DianeDimond.net. She got this new project, Talk Center America, where she's doing like a talk show over Skype where people can call in and Skype with her. But she's also she has a weekly column. Diane, can you tell us about the column that you post every week on DianeDimond.net?
Sure. First of all, it's distributed by Creator Syndicate to newspapers across the country every weekend. And so it runs, nationwide on the weekend. And then every Monday morning I get ownership back, so I get to post it on my website. And it's either DianeDimond.com or .net. Either one works. I bought both of those domains. It's funny. Can I just say parenthetically, Vito Carlucci and Steph Watts, these are friends of mine. Oh, my God. Yeah. I had no idea they'd been on before me.
I couldn't get you.
Well, hey, you just asked Steph. I went and did something with Steph recently for a show on Discovery ID. But anyway, back to my column. For anyone out there who has a newspaper who wants to run my column, just call Creator Syndicate. They'll hook you up. But I try to make people, Ed, think outside the box. We've been doing the same things in our criminal justice system for about, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And they don't always work. The 3 strikes or you're outlaw. And so now we got all these people in prison for, smoking marijuana 3 times, and they're in for 152 years or something. And our prisons are overcrowded. And hey, maybe we ought to take a breath and stop and think about a better way to do this. So I talk about issues like that. I talk about child molestation issues. I go cover cases like the Jerry Sandusky case. I was there in that courtroom for the whole event. I was covering the John Edwards case, the political corruption case. Sure.
Yeah. Now, my God, weren't there a lot of people who worked at that school who should be in jail right next to Sandusky?
Well, we're talking about Michael Jackson earlier. There were people who come out and say, oh, yeah, we knew all about that. Well, really?
Yeah, what is that?
Why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you say something? Why didn't people at Penn State go up to Jerry Sandusky and say, we know what you're doing and knock it off? Or pick up the phone and call 911. I don't know.
Well, he lost his gym privileges. He wasn't allowed to be on campus at certain times. Everyone knew what this guy was doing.
Right. And so you know what he did, Ed? He took the boys home.
Right.
Into his basement where he'd fashioned a sort of boy cave that his wife had no knowledge of. But, in all of these instances, I look back and there's always the alleged perpetrator. And in this case, Sandusky was found guilty of all but one charge, 45 charges. They're authority figures, or they're celebrities, or they're people of power that others just don't feel that they can go up against. If I go to the cops and turn in Jerry Sandusky or Michael Jackson or, Joe Blow, the pastor down the street, they're not going to believe me over them, so they don't even bother. And it's a bad habit, but it happens all the time. I hope it's going to stop happening because, we've revealed this phenomenon now of refusing to go to the police because we think they won't believe us. I think the police are starting to understand more and follow up more. So, Anyway, that's one of the topics I wrote about when I was covering Sandusky. But I also cover just esoteric things. Like one of my recent columns was about learning the smells of chemical weapons. I mean, did you know that the chemical weapon lewisite smells like geraniums?
I wouldn't know what a geranium smelled like.
Oh, come on. Stop.
I'm telling you, I would not.
Oh, see, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There's a guy who's invented a pack of playing cards with a permanent smell on them and then information for first responders. If you go to the scene of a crime or an emergency and you smell camphor or geraniums or garlic or the really strong odor of almonds, you might very well be up against a chemical weapon. And so that it behooves all of us to memorize these 8 major smells, because terrorism could happen again any time. So I write about that. I write about the Boston bomber. You know, everybody thinks he's going to get the death penalty. I'm going to bet you $5 he never gets the death penalty. So there's a column on that there. And
let me ask you some questions about the Boston bomber. There's a lot of strange stuff with that case. About how these FBI agents had interviewed these 2 brothers, and then later on they fell out of a helicopter.
Oh, that one, I had never heard that one. Ed, where do you get this stuff?
I got a memory, Diane. I have a memory that I can't forget anything. Okay, I hear the weirdest little facts, and I can't forget it. But I also can't forget, like someone insulted me when I was in 4th grade. I remember it. I remember every little thing.
I have a dear friend. I have a dear friend who's a retired Secret Service agent, and he's from Staten Island, and he says my name the same way as you do. Diane.
Oh, what's his name?
Diane. I can't forget anything. I had heard that the FBI had gone and questioned the older brother because he had been in the Middle East and what they thought was a terrorist training camp. And the Soviets warned us about him, and the FBI went and talked to him, and then that was it. They just let it drop.
But Diane, don't you think that that once this bombing did happen, these 2 FBI agents who had visited these boys and interviewed them because of a Russian tip would have said, "Hey, gee whiz, you know what? There's these 2 guys right around the corner from when that bomb went off that were suspected terrorists. And you know, when I went to their house, they had all these crock pots. They were baking chili everywhere in the house." Like, don't you think? You know, there's something would have struck their memory and said, "Hey, you know, let's take a look at this."
Well, I never heard about the crock pot and the chili thing.
That part I made a joke.
No, I'm teasing you. But look, I think that they had gone to talk to the older brother 4 or 5 years earlier, and they just sort of like, okay, case closed. And I'm sure, look, how many suspected terrorists are out there, and how many FBI law enforcement people do we have? They can't possibly keep track of every possibility. And so, you know, I don't want to fault law enforcement, because I think they dispatched these 2 pretty darn quick, killing one in a shootout in the street. And then, of course, his brother ran over him and killed him. Thank you, Mr. Sarnev, for killing your brother for us. But, you know, I try not to second guess cops is what I'm saying. I think that the majority of them are hardworking, good detectives. They try their best. They often remember cold case information. Hey, wait, I've got a serial killer who is doing this now. I had a case like this 12 years ago. And they remember. This case, they didn't. So I'm not going to condemn the whole police department or the whole FBI on it, but it just, it boggles the mind, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, you're a lot more forgiving than I am. I'll tell you that.
And, I guess you.
Yeah. And listen, everyone makes mistakes. I got no problem with that, but just seems to be a lot of fishiness going on, and being involved in a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of fishiness. So I just wonder what really went on in that whole story. Yeah.
Can I ask you, what kind of cases do you take mostly as a private investigator?
Well, lately what I'm doing is a lot of cell phone forensics. But I've been involved in stuff since the 80s, the Pizza Connection trial and the commission trial. I was involved in a lot of stuff, we're helping with the audio out of my friend's office there in Brooklyn. All kinds of stuff. I do cell phone forensics and computer forensics, but also infidelity cases and stuff like that. Criminal defense. I had a murder trial once. We did a cell phone in a murder case. So pretty much I'm out there. And I investigated Sarah Palin and Todd Palin up in Alaska there. I was involved in a congressional investigation into the Secret Service. So I've been involved in some stuff. And then, I also helped out when Mikhail Salahi turned up missing.
Oh, you're kidding me. Now, that's something we haven't talked about.
I know we haven't. Well, when
I wrote a book.
Go ahead.
I'm going to tell you why I wrote the book. It's called Cirque du Salahi, because I'm sitting here. I used to cover the White House. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. I covered Capitol Hill. I know what it takes to get into the White House and that nobody crashes the White House. Okay, you crash the White House, you're shot on the front lawn. I mean, that's just the way. So I'm watching this case unfold about these two party crashers, and I'm thinking to myself, what? This doesn't sound right. There's a whole line of party people waiting to get into this state dinner, and these two crash? That can't happen, I said to myself. So then I watch, and by gosh, this couple, Tark and Mikhail Salahi, get hauled before Congress. There are congressional hearings about them. People are talking about his name sounds like he's a Palestinian, which he wasn't. And so finally, my literary agent called and said, I've met these people. You need to go meet these people in Virginia. So I went to their vineyard property with them in Virginia, and I sort of lived there with them for a couple of weeks. And I realized these two, they can't put 25 cents together, let alone come up with a big plot to sneak into the White House. And I begin to unravel how this became a story. And I just said, okay, I got to write a book about this. And the bottom line, Ed, is this couple was very, into the society of Washington, D.C. and Virginia and all of that, rural Virginia where their winery was. And there are two columnists from the Washington Post with a .com column called Reliable Sources. And they just hated the Salahis. Anything they did and everything they did, they hated them. And they wrote terrible articles about them all the time. And to be honest, Tark Salahi was a shyster. He would charm the pants off anybody and steal your money. The wife went along with it because she was the wife. I'm not sure she knew what the heck was going on. But anyway, so I decoded how this story became a story and how it broke over a Thanksgiving holiday when there was no other news happening, and it just got glommed onto and it went worldwide. And then I began to figure out who these two people are and how reality television,
right?
If you remember, they were on the Real Housewives of D.C., which was stupid because they lived in Virginia anyway, how they had been molded and guided and cajoled by reality television. And here's the bottom line. This says it all. They did this Housewives of D.C. for Bravo Television. Bravo had cameras with the Salahis the night they went into the White House for the state dinner. They held on to that video for 8 months while the Salahis got dragged up to Capitol Hill saying, we didn't crash, we were on a list, we were on a secondary list, that somebody owed us a favor because we had donated all this wine. We didn't crash. Please believe us. And Bravo knew it was true because they had the video of them being waved in by a Secret Service agent with a clipboard. But they held it for 8 months so they could promote it and promote it and promote it and promote it for the day that they revealed that footage on television. It was just shameful, I think, what they did to the Salahis. Fast forward, she finally left Tark, and I knew that she was going to leave Tark because she and I talked all the time. And she went to her one true love, Neil Schon, who is the lead guitarist of Journey. And my husband and I got invited to their wedding December 15th in San Francisco. They got married in a grand style, and they are living happily ever after.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, she turned up missing one day.
Yeah, but she left. She left Tark. She ran away from him to go with Neil.
Yeah.
Tark calls the FBI and says, "Oh my God, she's been kidnapped."
Yeah, I know, because the FBI called me.
How'd you get involved?
Gina was their agent at the time, and she was my agent as well. She's the one that got me involved in the Tiger Woods case. I did all the cell phones in the Tiger Woods case. She's the one that got me involved in the what was that guy, Ashton Kutcher and stuff. Yeah,
Gina Rodriguez, right?
yeah. So she was my agent as well at the time. So when she freaked out, she was freaking out. She thought that she was really abducted, and so did Tariq, as far as I know. And so they called me up and said, "Hey, what can you do?" So I was trying to locate her, and then they got a hold of the FBI, and the FBI said, "Hey, what do you guys?" I can do stuff. I can trace emails and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff I can do. So I was sending her emails to see when she opened it up, where she was located when she opened it up. So I guess the FBI checked out her email account as well, and they called me up and they said, "Hey, what are you doing? Who are you? What are you doing?" And but the way I tell the story is that shortly after my consultation with the FBI, they were able to locate her.
Where were they at the time? Do you remember?
No, I know there was she was like they were on tour with him.
Nashville.
Where was it?
Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville. Yeah, well, it was a while ago. Yeah, but I don't know. Was it Nashville? Or was it like Ohio or something like that? But
well, they moved around quickly because they do a night in Nashville, and then they go to Cincinnati, and then they go to Atlanta, and then he was on tour at the time. Ed, you should have called me, man.
What? Because you knew?
I knew where she was.
I didn't know. I had no idea you would have been connected whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. And then Tark decided he was going to sue me because I must have known, and it was a crazy, crazy time. But the book was already out by that point, and my reason for writing it was to show people don't always believe everything you read. These people were Palestinian terrorists, and they were this and that, and they were that close to the president, and they could have stuck poison into his drink, and it was all so foolish that I just had to write about it. But anyway, it was a beautiful wedding, by the way.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah, I spoke to Neil as well later on. He had a different situation we had to talk about. Very, very interesting, the whole situation. It's such a small world,
Did that have to do with his ex-wife?
Yeah, he was being stalked.
Oh, no, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about a guy named Jeffrey Rutledge, and we can talk about him now because he's dead. He was a terrible stalker, and he stalked me for a long, long time, and stalked Mikkel for a long, long time, and then began to stalk Neil. Yeah, he was found dead in his little sleazy Chinatown apartment in Los Angeles with his computer on still in front of him and his body almost mummified and his arm stuck out to the side and his hand in a box of donuts.
Oh, my God, you're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding.
What was he stalking you about?
Oh, he had a thing about that he was an investigative reporter. And how dare I think I was an investigative reporter? And I engaged him a little bit, and I said, really, what have you written? I'd like to read it. Well, he wrote one thing like in 1989 in Playboy magazine about OJ or something. It was bizarre. I don't know. He was a poor sick man, I think, is really what it was. But that's over now. That chapter is closed.
Yeah, it really is really nerve-wracking, really. Some of these people that are out there and how they yeah.
What you do, Ed, is very important, and it's never going to go away in this digital age. If you have an expertise in forensics and cell phones and email and digital traffic patterns, you are going to be in high demand if you're not already.
I was actually, believe it or not, I think I was hired by the Jackson family because later on, both Brad Miller, I never met him, I've never spoken to him, and Mark Garagos, I've never met him and never spoken to him, both Michael Jackson defense team members, they recommend work to me. They refer clients to me. And I don't know how they would know what I'm capable of doing, but I heard one time one of the Jackson brothers was on Larry King Live, and he was talking about how he hired somebody to trace an email. And I got to think that someone, I looked it up, he wasn't in my records, but that he used an agent to hire me to trace an email for him.
Brad Miller was a PI, right?
He still is.
Yeah, is a PI. I think he testified at the trial, or he was around. I remember that name.
Yeah. He was Michael Jackson's PI for Mark Garagos, and very interesting because he had an office that was right next door to one of the psychiatrists who was involved with that boy, the second boy who made the lawsuit.
Right, Gavin Arvizo.
Right. Hey, did
Yeah.
you talk to them, that family?
I do. In fact, now that you bring it up, I will tell you. It's not a secret, but before I went to Mikhail Salahi's wedding in December 15th, on November 30th in Atlanta, Georgia, I went to Gavin Arvizo's wedding.
Get out of here.
And he's turned into a fine young man, I must say. This is a kid who was, his parents were planning his funeral at 10 years old because he had cancer and he was dying. And the doctor
right.
said,
I forgot about that.
he's going to die, so you better, get ready. And he survived, and he survived that trial, and he survived, forgive me for saying, but a crazy, crazy mom. And he put himself through Emory University. He made the dean's list. He wanted to be a lawyer, and he has applied to all sorts of law schools, including Harvard and Stanford, and he does it all himself. He doesn't get any help. He doesn't get any loans. He hopes for scholarships, but they don't always come, and he still is on the dean's list in college and married a beautiful woman, a Baptist preacher's daughter.
Really?
And Gavin is an avid Catholic. So they had both a priest and her father, the Baptist minister, perform the ceremony. It was really pretty, very heartwarming.
Well, we're down to the last couple of minutes. We got 3 minutes left. I had 2 minutes left, and I'd love to ask you about what it was like to when you were on part of the raid into Neverland. But if there's something else you'd rather tell us about, something you want to finish up with.
Well, before we went to break, I was talking about Michael Jackson and personal. I get into a zone like you do, I'm sure, when you're working. And you're going for facts, interviews. Let me make my notes, do your job. But besides all that, I'm a human being. And I am a mother of a child. And I have covered a lot of stories involving child molestation. And I have enormous respect for the talent of Michael Jackson and enormous pity for the childhood he went through. Now, the bad childhood doesn't excuse bad acts as an adult, but I'll tell you, if you read my book, I believe that he was in fact passed around as a kid by his father to help ensure the success of the Jackson 5. So not only did his extreme talent carry that family forward, but maybe more than that.
I heard that story too, and it was told by one of the brothers.
Well, the brothers could have stopped it. The mother could have stopped it. Nobody stopped it. And in my book, everybody's responsible for what happened to Michael Jackson. He didn't die with a needle in his arm out of nowhere. He died with a needle in his arm because he had a terrible, emotionally wrenching life, a rewarding life full of talent, but a very wrenching life. And I never, ever let that stray very far from my mind when I was reporting on him.
Yeah, we're down to a couple of seconds. What do you think about the kids, though? Blanket and Prince. We gotta go.
I think they'll be okay. That's the bottom.
Okay. Diane Dimond, I can't thank you enough. Oh,
hey, thanks for having me, Ed. I appreciate it.
No, I'm going to beg you to come back. DianeDimond.com. All her books. I'm going to put a link to every book she's ever written on my blog, the Opperman Report. I can't thank you enough, Diane.
You bet. My pleasure.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right.